This is Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde.
Welcome to another episode of Agent Provocateur. Adam Wylde, how are you?
I'm great, Allan. I'm sad you're not here, though. I could have gotten used to you being in the same room as me here.
Yeah, well, I do live in L.A.
I know. It's hard life. Hard life. Thank you for the reminder, just as it's cold, wet, rainy, and dark here right now. So thank you for that. I got to ask you, how's the week been since we talked, or half week it's been since we talked?
It's been good, real busy. Signed 500 holiday cards with a little note to everybody. Yours is on the way.
Amazing.
Yep, and got that done. Banged them out in 2 days, and dealing with a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. But things are good. Things are good. One kid is home, and my daughter comes home tomorrow. She's writing her last exam at Berkeley, so we're going to have the whole family together, and then we're going to be off to Seattle on the 22nd.
And then, and that's the family get together every year in Seattle.
Yes, my in-laws are in Seattle, and we're going to go up. We go spend Christmas with them every year up there.
That's awesome. And then World Juniors.
And then 27th in the morning, I fly to Ottawa, and I'll be in Ottawa until the 31st.
Amazing. Any favorites this year in terms of teams? Like, do you have any breakdowns for us? Who do you think is going to be the best team this year?
Well, I represent a lot of players on the Czech team, a lot of players on the German team, and a bunch of players on the Slovak team. So, and of course, with Canada hosting the tournament in our nation's capital, I say that as I'm also Canadian citizen, I can say our nation's capital. There's going to be always when the tournament's in Canada, huge crowds, a lot of local interest, people fly in from everywhere. It's the best tournament of the year, and it's a great time.
Amazing. Well, listen, Allan, I think today's episode is, you got this lined up. This is a familiar friend to anybody that's 100%er, as they call it on the CJ show, somebody that's listened to every episode. He was a part of our opening episode, and he is Glenn Healy. And Allan, why are we bringing him on to talk today?
So Glenn Healy, as most everybody knows, is the executive director of the NHL Alumni Association. There's literally thousands of people today who are members of the organization. And one of the issues that has been out there for a long time is healthcare for retired players. And specifically, there is a plan that continues a player's healthcare coverage from player to retired player with the same level of coverage at the top tier, and that costs about $36,000 a year, the healthcare premium. Now, recently, those tiers, 4 tiers have been created. The lowest tier, with some basic coverage, will cost around $7,000 or $8,000 a year. Right. And in the last collective bargaining agreement, there was a stipend where the NHLPA will actually contribute money towards a retired player's healthcare coverage. And we're going to talk about all of this. But my focus has always been on the hundreds of players with no health care coverage at all because they can't afford it.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to talk about. That's why we're bringing Glenn on to give a whole overview. I mean, he's the guy representing all of the alumni, all of the retired players. No one is more knowledgeable in this area than him. And it's a very important issue. It's an issue that he's been incredibly passionate about. And I'm really looking forward to having that discussion with you and him together.
So should we bring him on?
Let's bring him on. Glenn, how you doing today?
Oh, man, that's a tough question. So that's it. The interview's over. You can't ask like that. How do you expect me to answer that? So we're done here. Okay. Sorry, Adam, Jesse, we're done.
It's been great having you as always.
Electric, Glenn. Electric.
Yeah.
Award winning.
Tell I've been so truthful in this interview, so it's been really good. No one can accuse me of not telling the truth. Allan, doing great. Just getting ready for a great holiday season, whichever you celebrate it, in the manner you celebrate it. It is, it's a great time of year. I when I play with the New York Rangers, the one magical time of being in New York, well, winning a cup was magical, but around Christmas with all the streets lit up in Park Avenue and everybody so friendly and just the magic of the city and Rockefeller Center and skating and the trees and Central Park and the rocket, you name it. It was just nothing bad about New York. And then Christmas ends, and we're back to competing for every parking spot, every line in a grocery store, and F you and get out of my way. And all right. So, but this is a magical time of year. So I look forward to it every year. This is a special time.
Well, given that you seem to be in such a jolly mood, I thought it would be a great opportunity for you in your position as executive director of the NHL Alumni Association, and as an aside, the amazing things that you have done since you've gone to work for the retired players and for the alumni. It's a completely different association. What you have done is nothing short of miraculous. There aren't enough words to describe how much of an impact you've made on these players' lives and on their transition to being a former player and helping those that are challenged and in great need. And you're always there. One of the top issues for all of these players is health coverage, medical insurance in retirement. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that all works?
Well, every player has a couple things in common, no matter who you are, how great a player you are. Crosby, Ovechkin, McDavid, they will all retire, and they will all become a player that goes through some form of transition. Not every player will go through that transition well, financially, emotionally, maritally, physically. The game beats you up. There's no out of bounds. There never will be. So we leave the game with some significant baggage at times. We have a very short career, and we have a very long life. And my role is to get that long life to be as glorious and as enjoyable as the short career.
Because what's the point of making all that money? Yeah. What's the point of making all that money if in retirement, after you've made all that money, your brain is injured, or financially things didn't work out the way you thought they would, or you've got marital issues, you've got family issues, you're hobbling around with a knee that needs to be replaced, a hip that needs to be replaced, a bad back. What's the point of it all if you don't get to enjoy your life and your family in retirement?
And I think it's a really good point. And I think the other side of it is, but not all NHL players, when we retire, we're the land of the misfit toys. Like, we are not. Go watch that on one of the Christmas shows that's out. It's quite good. It's a good one. But we're not that. There are a lot of players that retire from the game and are very successful. They've taken all the attributes that they had on the ice and they use them off the ice, and they live an incredibly enjoyable, fruitful, purposeful life after they're done playing. I think it's the group that, kind of falls through the cracks, that needs a little help from their friends. And I look at us as a very unique brotherhood. We're a unique brotherhood that needs to take care of one another and protect one another. And when you have the ability to do that with the connections that we have and the players that we have that are willing to help, and they're all willing to help, why wouldn't we do it? And that's what we do. Make tomorrow better than today for a bunch of players that maybe just don't have that hope, the help, the purpose, the contact, the drive. I will lead them down the path, and I will guarantee them, if I talk to them today, I will make a better tomorrow for them than today. And then I'll worry about getting tomorrow. And I will do the same thing on that particular day. But all the players retire. All of them should have that enjoyable long life after their short career. And sometimes they need a little help from their friends. And that's where, as NHL players, we dig in. As you know, the help isn't necessarily going to come from the clubs. You're not playing in that sweater anymore. You're never going to win them a game. You'll not get a shutout. Fleury at some point will retire, and then he's not going to help the Minnesota Wild or the Pittsburgh Penguins or anybody achieve the championship. And so what he needs is a guy beside him to be that teammate like he had in the locker room. That's the group that is going to help you through some of the tough and troubling times. If you're thinking it's the team, you're mistaken, because they're in the win business. We're in the hope and help business. And if you're a current member of the NHLPA, you're in the I need better arbitration, better free agency, better pension. You're in that business. So we're totally different than all of them, but we are finding a better tomorrow than today for players when it comes to a whole host of issues that are off the court, off the ice, off the pitch.
Well, Charles Barkley famously said, Father Time is undefeated. So now we are into retirement. How does players' health insurance work?
So typically what happens with all players is you have a chance, and there's a couple different levels of it. So let's take away the current players. Let's look at players from the past, the Gretzkys, the Mario Lemieux, the Mark Messiers. When you retire, you have a short window to decide whether you're going to keep your health care that's provided you as an NHL player. It was extremely expensive. Almost all players did not keep it. 96% could not afford it, could not keep it. It ranged somewhere in the $36,000 US a month. A lot of players
a year.
A year. Sorry, a month. Yeah, that would be one heck of a healthcare plan.
I was just going to say, wow.
Comes
Great plan.
Jet. Yeah, a free jet as well. And we have, there's a lot of players that are European, and when they retire, they go back to Sweden. They have a different healthcare plan than we have in Canada than you've got in the United States. State to state, it's so different. So most players didn't keep it. So that forced them then to go out and get some form of health care. Whatever it may be, they had to protect them and their family. And what we found over the years was that plan that was created was not good enough. Not good enough for almost all the players that got something, because there was no health care plan available to them. And Johnny Bauer, yes, he can go to Canada where he lives and go into the hospital and go in right away if he's in need of immediate medical care. But he goes into a ward with 3 other people watching him pass away. And to me, that's not good enough. To me, that's not the way we should look at some of these cherished athletes that I'm representing. So we're out to try to find, I understand a healthcare full-blown plan is near impossible, and probably would have a number with a B on the end of it, particularly if it's up to the standard that you want. But there are wraparound plans that can provide prescriptions and dental. Shocking, none of us have our own teeth. Well, you'd be surprised. And provide a whole bunch of different things, a buffet items of things that can help your day with help and hope. Because as everybody knows, if you don't have your health, that's all you think about. So we have about 1,600 players that have played 400 or more games. And if you look at that group, they pretty much have given up their life to this craft they call hockey, which beats them up. 40-year-olds are 60, 60-year-olds are 80. So it becomes the game does beat you up. And so as a result, we're trying to create a wraparound plan that would cover players that have made a craft of this game. And I think we've accomplished it. And it's now in the hands of the NHL and the NHLPA to create what they would consider to be the best, most sustainable plan that would fit their needs as well as our needs. And we would do this as a partnership with the 3 of us.
Okay, so there are 1,600 retired former NHL players with 400 games played. How many total players are there out there, irregardless of NHL games played? 1 game to over 1,000. How many are there?
5,000.
There are 5,000 former NHL players, even if you just played one game.
We have about 1,100 that have played 10 games or less. So,
Wow.
those guys that have played 10 or less are probably, with Adam running a podcast. Good luck competing with Adam. Don't have a chance.
Hey, anybody can buy a podcast equipment, right?
Sticks a microphone and, there you go. Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to get the secret out of the bag. So there's, and we have the qualification of being alumni as one game. Probably would have liked to have brought it a little bit higher, so the group isn't as great and as grand, but it is a group that you play that first shift, you are officially alumni, and I like that in the sense that we're not going to shut the door on anybody. You're part of our team, and whatever you need from us, regardless if you're a Hall of Famer or a Hall of Shamer like myself, you're going to get it. You're going to be treated like you should be treated. But it is a diverse group. And, we're looking at over 1,300 guys that are European players. And, Allan, you'd know that. You represent a good chunk of European players that, back in the 70s, we had our first Russian player in 88, Sergei Pryakin. I mean, we didn't have Swedish players until Inga Hammerstrom and Borje Salming pioneer and broke that barrier. And we all thought they were scared to play in the NHL until we challenged them and then realized, they're pretty tough. Swedish players are tough. But they had to go through the Broad Street Bullies and the Boston Bruins to show everybody that they could do it. And then we've had a bunch of countries that have followed suit now to the point where Sweden is the number 3 provider of our talent in the National Hockey League. It's incredible for a small country. And to a man, all these players come over from Sweden. I don't know who coached them, but they don't need to be coached in the NHL. They're the smartest, most genuine group of people I've ever met and played with. So it's vastly different than the league in the 70s, in the 80s, 90s, as it's all changed. And then keeping that in mind, guys, as we're building these programs, the wellness program, the library of services for mental wellness, you name the host of programs that we're creating, we're also creating programs for the current players because, I know what the guys in the 80s and 90s need. I lived it. I played with them. They're my friends. I was there when their kids were born. I was there when they were married. I was at their wedding. I was at their divorce party. I came to their next wedding. Like, I've been to it all. So I kind of get a feel for them. But the current players, what do they need? And what do I have to build for them? So when Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Fleury, when they step into that next realm of their career, their life, their next most enjoyable part, it is built for them too. And that would be grossly and different than potentially what you had from guys that played in the 60s without a helmet. Who'd have thunk? 70s, 80s, like it has changed through the generation. And we have to build it looking face forward as to what we need to build to make it better for them too, as well as the guys that were on the bus with me.
So how many players are retired and in the NHL players program that they have the option to go into on retirement?
So I'm not sure what program we're talking about, Allan, but I would say
the Rolls-Royce program.
Yeah,
continuing their coverage from an NHL player. They're now retired with their families, and now they have access to the retired player health insurance.
So before the last collective bargaining agreement, it was about 4%. And a lot of them that kept it were employees of teams. The team picked up the tab, right? You want to work with me as a general manager? I'll take care of your health care. Okay, beautiful. And actually, most of the teams implored those general managers, don't give up the PA healthcare plan. It's better than the one we have.
And that's the one that costs about $36,000 a year.
And then through the last collective bargaining, they created a 4-tier plan, which allows you to go and move down and up in the levels based on your needs, your family's needs. So there was some options. And then wisely, through collective bargaining, there was a subsidy provided to the current players. And they can take advantage of that.
And how much is the subsidy?
Excuse me, a bit of a cough. It's about $6,000 a year. Okay. So if you get your lower level plan, you're on the hook for $7,000 or $8,000 a year for healthcare.
So Glenn, one thing I'd like to point out is that if a player is in the program at any of the tiers, of the 4 tiers from 1 to 4, and they fall on hard times, and if it's between paying their mortgage or making a car payment or paying for kids' tuition in university or paying for their health care, usually it's the health care, which is the first bill they don't pay. If they fall out of the plan, are they able to get back into the plan?
No.
Why?
Well, I certainly didn't make the rules on any of this. And if I did, I would love to change them. But the reality is this. In some ways, they really don't want kind of old goats like you and me in any of our plans, do we? Because, when you're 26 years old, I mean, what are your issues? Where are we going to eat? Games where tomorrow? When's the plane leave? Now you get older and the game beats you up a little bit. You do tend to spend a little bit more time at the doctor's office, a little bit more time getting some of these surgeries taken care of. And so the older and the more taxing you are on the plan, you are going to take the mitigation of risk and drive it through the roof. So in some ways, they really don't want you in the plan. I think that would be the accurate way. And if you can provide any insurance carrier that can tell you any different, I'd be shocked, right? Older people are going to use healthcare more. And when you get older and older and older, it seems like that's all you're doing is going from doctor's appointment. So once out, you are definitely out. You can never get back in. And that is a hard thing because in most cases, the decision is not yours. It's something else that forces your hand, whether it is a divorce, whether it is a financial strife. There's something that causes you to give up that Cadillac of an insurance plan. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be something for you to provide that help and hope that you need when you're kind of run astray. Now, I would say this. If I was the only one beating down the door at this, you could say, Glenn, you're completely maverick. You should be looking at something else. No one's done this. Uncharted waters. Go somewhere else and figure something else out. All the other sports have done this. We're the last to put the brick in the wall. And I am imploring the PA in the league to pursue this, and they have agreed with me to do it. So it's not like I'm doing it on my own. I'm not standing in Iwo Jima putting a flag in. No, they get it. They're working with me. But we would be a sports entity to follow the rest. And I do think it's time in our business, where we are financially, where this league is with its growth, with its revenue, with the way the players have built the game in the past to pave the roads for the current players to drive on it, that we're at that stage now, that last brick can be put in the wall.
So I can tell you this issue became real to me twofold. Number one, as I progressed in the business, I did a lot of travel, especially to the tournaments, and I got to know a lot of NHL scouts. Mm-hmm. Many NHL scouts are former players. And you meet them at the gates on the way to tournaments like the World Juniors or the Under-18 World Championships or the Five Nations in February. You fly through a Minneapolis or a Detroit or a JFK, and there's going to be 10 or 15 scouts on your flight going over to Europe, which is where you're usually going. And you stay at the same hotels. You sit there at night after the games and have a few beers, and you talk about a whole host of issues, but almost always at some point in time, the issue of healthcare kept coming up in conversations. And I didn't understand it. I didn't realize it. And I started asking a lot of questions. And Peels, I started hearing horror stories. These are guys employed, but they all have 5, 6, 7 former teammates that they love like brothers, and they have horror stories about some of their situations. And it really opened my eyes. And, I came back from some of these tournaments and I started making calls, and I started trying to get as much information as I could. And you and I have had many conversations on this topic in the past. And every time I'm on the phone with you, I'm a student, and you're giving me facts, and you're giving me situations, and it, really your passion, your drive, your fire in protecting these guys and trying to do right by these guys. And one thing you say that really struck home to me, there's guys who played the game, who are scouting or working, whatever. They're 45, 50, 55 years old. Their bodies are so beat up, they have the bodies of a 65-year-old. And they're having the health issues of a 65-year-old. I can't tell you how many former players are hobbling into an arena to scout a game, and their hips are bad, their knees are bad, they need a replacement, or they've had a replacement, or they're getting physical therapy, their backs are messed up, and their shoulders, I can't raise my arm above this. And that's if they're cognitively doing well. Many are not cognitively doing well and can't work. So let's talk about the guys right now, former players who have no insurance at all. How many are those guys out there?
They're about 7% of the players that have no or the absolute barest minimum insurance. And so typically what happens with those kind of players, and, for a lot of them that you're talking about, there was no remedy for them. Like, there was no place to call, and the phone would ring and you had a solution. There was no solution. You would call and it'd be like, hey, can't help. Sorry. There is that solution now if you call us at the NHL Alumni. And for players that don't have health care, we've got a number of remedies that they can follow. One, we can provide them with that surgery that they require. And you're right, there are players that wait to the very end. I'll be the first to tell you, I got 2 fake hips, and every time that I had a hip issue, I would have my entire staff and family tell me, you're limping, Glenn, and I would deny it. No, I'm not. You guys are crazy. It's that's the way I walk, Yeah, like a 95-year-old. Okay. And so finally, I would, at gunpoint almost, go and, all right, and the surgeon would look at me and say, you're kidding, right? You're kidding? I know. I've known for a while. I mean, I've been telling everybody, and they just haven't. No, that's not the case. So for players that do need surgeries, medical care, we have the ability to take the phone call and to direct them. I may catch the football, but I'll pass it off to our mental wellness team if that's what's needed. In Pittsburgh, out of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, out of the Royal in Ottawa, where we can get, players and their wives as well in 13 seconds. Doesn't take long for them to get the help they need. Or at the KI Institute in Sweden, one of the best in the world. So we're covering the globe with a whole host of services, library services for players. So the way it stands now, yes, there's a financial component that hits us because the players don't necessarily have the insurance or the care that they need, but we're not going to turn someone away because they don't have that insurance. They're going to get the care they need. It does become a lot easier when you have, these things built into a plan that allows you to go get assessments if you think your, anxiety is becoming an issue, sleep is becoming an issue, alcohol, coping mechanisms are becoming an issue. We have that remedy built into a plan. The way it stands now, no insurance, I'm the plan, and I've got to direct things the way we direct them. Certainly a lot easier when we can look at 1,500 plus players and know that they're covered with the appropriate amount of insurance to get them the hope they need.
So what would it cost to have every player insured under some kind of plan? What are we talking about here?
So if you're looking at the players that have played 400 or more games, you would be less than $7 million to cover
annually.
And yes, and built into that would be a a small window to create insurance for players that have nothing. But again, we're doing wraparound. We look at what the players have and wrapping it around it. And I think the positives with the plan that we're creating, number one, pre-existing conditions don't matter. So I'd be hard-pressed to find any player without a pre-existing condition. Maybe on this podcast, I could find one of the four of us that's on it that doesn't have a pre-existing condition. Healthy as could be and no issues with me whatsoever. And if that's anybody on this, congratulations. So the plan would eliminate anyone with pre-existing. So if you have diabetes, you're in. You've got a heart issue, you're in. If you have concussion issues or functional integration issues, you're in. The second thing is the plan's very adaptive. So if we decide after the first year, more and more players are using dental than hearing, we can flip. We can put more into dental and take care of some of the issues. Most players, if they've got a bridge or a crown, it's probably done in the 80s or 90s. It doesn't fit anymore. It falls out all the time. You don't look good for your Christmas picture. You can't eat properly. Some have major infection issues with their teeth. So we can funnel money as we adapt a plan based on what their needs are. So
Wow.
I think it provides all of that. It's financially responsible, it is adaptable, and it eliminates pre-existing conditions.
So we're talking $218,000 per club.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here, to have every player over 400 games covered.
And I think the other side of it too, Allan, is that number that we have diminishes each year, because you're looking at a group that's getting older, passing away, and the current players that are coming out of the game are going to keep that medical plan that they have that has a subsidy to it. So they're not going to require what we're creating, but they are going to have their own plan, which is state of the art, and I'm happy for them. And they've acquired that through the CBA negotiations. And maybe we should have done the same. We didn't, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have something that the other sports have. And I think that's what the PA believes, and that's what the league believes, and that's what we believe. And that's why the three of us are merrily dancing down the road. The music has stopped, but there's a chair for each of us to sit in. Like, it's not like one of us is out of a chair and they believe we need to create this, but what's the most sustainable, the one that's going to last the longest and provide the most care for the players in need? That's the limit we're at. It's not about the money. In my mind, if it is, they haven't let me on to that secret. If it is that, then please let me on to that, and I'll have to find a way to generate some of those dollars.
Okay. Adam?
Glenn, I just have I guess more of a personal question that relates to this. You were the first guest we ever had on this podcast. You were the first episode we ever had. And at that point, we talked about your involvement in the player strike and then the lockout, and we were talking about hockey cards and Gretzky and Lemieux giving up their personal rights to that and what that did for the players union, how you guys got the players union funded. And I'm listening to you talk through this. And I'll be honest, as a guy who, life insurance, we still need that in Canada, even though we've got health plan. We do need extra health insurance. I know that through my company here, I have health insurance beyond what the government offers. And the one thing that's true about all of it is that it is line by line, extremely boring stuff. This is dry. This is, it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of details to consider. You got to go back and forth. Glenn, why have you stepped up? Why have you become the guy that has done this? Why does this matter to you? What's for you, your personal motivation? Because it seems to me that the community of the NHL has always mattered to you. And I'm just curious where that comes from.
Well, I would ask you the question, if not me, well, why wouldn't I do it? Why not? If you have gas in the tank, and you are able to do this, and you have the connections that are required to be able to make a difference, why wouldn't I do it? Mm-hmm. If I didn't do it, I would consider myself to be a terrible teammate and a pretty selfish guy who's just going to go take his money and go live back in Pickering, Ontario, next to a nuclear reactor. Okay, yes, the nuclear reactor and living in that. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so shame on me for that one. But there's gas in the tank. There's the ability to do it. There's the contacts that I have. And I do know that I'm going to set this place up for the next guy who sits in this seat. And it's going to be a lot easier than, say, when I first came in. And there wasn't a lot set up. In fact, nothing was set up.
Nothing was set up when you came on board. Nothing.
So it is important, if you can, to make a difference. You know, we all do charitable things. You know, we contribute to cancer. Adam, are you going to cure it on your own? Probably not. I tell you what, you're going to put one little brick in the wall to make a difference if you take part in hockey to conquer cancer. Are we going to cure ALS for Mark Curtin? Because we went to Ottawa with Wayne Gretzky and Brendan Shanahan, myself, and Daryl Sittler, and we tried to make a difference for the government. Probably not in one meeting, not one visit, but we rallied around a teammate and we tried to make a difference. Is this health plan going to be perfect? No, there'll be people that aren't happy with it. It does include X, Y, and Z, but it's a start. But I do think you've got to have people to step up and say, I want to make a difference. And when I'm going to do things for others, it's probably a good chance I'm going to be remembered for it. And I do think I have that ability now to do it. There will be a time when I'm not going to have that ability. I'm going to be, whether it's not well enough, too tired to do it. And at that point, you lay down and someone else picks up the fight. And that may be Allan that picks up the fight, because there's never been a more pro player guy on the planet. But it's going to be somebody. But when I turn the light off, it's going to be in a lot better place than it was. So, yes, I look at my dad. My dad fought in World War II. And from Scotland, they came from, 11 kids, came from nothing. Fought in the war for 5 years. When the war ended, and again, his salary through all the 5 years of the war, nothing. Zero.
Yeah.
Okay. War ended. He was sent to Palestine as a peacekeeper. His last day as a peacekeeper was at the King David Hotel when it got blown up.
Wow.
Okay. Why did he have to do that? Didn't have to do it. Now, why bother fighting in this thing they call a war? Why? Well, probably because it's a good thing we're not speaking German. I'm not drinking German beer, and Oktoberfest isn't my Christmas. So thank you to all those people that gave that sacrifice. And I think some of those traits my dad passed down to me, which is, you have to do some things for other people that aren't as blessed as you have maybe been in your life. And that's what I'm going to do. So if there's a characteristic he passed on, that's a pretty damn good one that he passed on to me. And through all of the time that, he was my dad, never talked about the war one time. I wouldn't have had a clue that he was even there, other than later on you look at the medals and pictures and went, well, that was a unique experience. I'm glad I didn't have to do that. So maybe that's part of the answer. It's long-winded, Adam, but that's probably where I'm at between the years anyways with all this stuff. But my heart's in the right place with the players, because
Certainly.
A lot of guys that need help I played with, I played against. I was there for all of their big moments, all their powerful moments in their life, and maybe they need a little help from that unique brotherhood, and I'll provide it.
So you're talking about players needing help, and I know, and many other people know, some of the stories that you deal with on a regular basis. And when I tell people how many former players are struggling financially, health-wise, and don't know where to turn, I always get a side eye or a little scoff like, you're embellishing. This isn't true. You're not on the level. You're saying this for a reason. Without naming names, unless there's names you want to name, can you tell us a little bit about what's really going on out there in the community?
Well, I never would name names. I mean, I
That's
think
fine.
what makes this work the best, when we played on teams, the locker room had its sanctity. It was a place where nothing came out of the locker room. Everything stayed within those walls. Mm-hmm. And players that did talk with some loose lips probably found themselves on other teams pretty quick, because that sanctity of the room was broken. And it's no different here with us. So a player calls, they know that conversation is between me and them until I pass it on to our medical staff. And at that point, it's between the medical staff and the player. And I don't find out a lot about much of anything. I might know that it's the Minnesota player. That's a big state with a lot of players. So I don't really know who it is fully. I can kind of piece it together, but it stays within the confines of the locker room. So, but I can honestly say that we're probably helping currently close to 500 and I'm going to say just under 600 players. Wow. So, I mean, that's a lot of players, but
that's a lot of players.
Wow.
And we've done something a little different than other sports have done in the sense that we are helping the wives. We have 36 players that have dementia, Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's, and their wife is the caregiver, and that's a tough job. It's not an easy job for the player that was bigger than life himself as an NHL player, kind of ran the household, like me in my house. I'm the fixer. My kids fall down, I make it better. I pick them up. I brush off their knee. Oh, it'll be fine, honey. Don't worry about it. I was the fixer in my house. Well, when you're suffering from some of those ailments, you're not the fixer anymore, and you're not that guy in the household. So it's the wives that have to do the yeoman's work, and we have a female social worker that works just with the wives. Any wife that has an issue, any wife that is going through transition, they're able to use all of our programs too. Because I really believe that if it's not right in your house, it's not right in your own house. And so we've got to make sure we take care of that family dynamic. So yeah, when I say it's just south of 600, some are wives, some are acute interventions where immediacy is important. You've got to help players right away. Can't wait till this afternoon. It can't wait till 4:20. It's got to happen now. Okay, if that's the case, we're set up for that. But a lot of it might be a slow burn, getting people out of some of the issues that they're in, and we've got the team to do it. Some are waiting for surgeries, some are getting them, some are just looking for immigration answers. All of that taken care of. Some are just looking at do I need a will for my corporation? Some are saying, hey, I played in the U.S. Can I collect Social Security? I don't have an attorney to do that. Well, we do. We've got someone who can walk you through that. So, there's a whole host of things. Some are on the more acute side, but a lot of them, as you're going through that in your day-to-day, it matters the utmost to you. So no matter what your issue is, it's not small. It's important to you, and it's important to me. It's important to our team.
Wow.
So of the 600, how many are acute in the sense that you're getting urgent calls and something needs to be done now? So how often does that happen in your world, in your life?
Last week, we dealt with 14 players. So that's a busy
week. 2 a day.
Wow. 14 players that we had immediacy, and we had to not deal with it tomorrow, but you have to deal with it yesterday. So it is a growing number. The other side of it, too, is this. The more help you provide, and our chief medical officer is one of the top neurosurgeons in the world. And he said to me, when you provide water to Arabs, Glenn, they will come. And I thought it was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I thought, how are you a neurosurgeon? I mean, gosh, that's so dumb. I don't know what you're talking about. And then about 2 months go by, and as the word gets out that there's help provided, just call this number. You can get, some remedy to what you're going through. That's what he meant. Because the more the word gets out, the more you're providing water to Arabs, the more they're going to come. And there are a lot of players that maybe would keep it in the back closet, keep it as a secret. Don't let any of this out. I'll deal with this on my own, which we all know doesn't happen. Yeah. They are now willing to step forward because, number one, they know it's in full secrecy. It stays in the locker room. And two, there's going to be an answer. And so, if we've got to build it and it's 1,000 players, hallelujah. We're helping 1,000 players and their families and their kids. And that to me is about as soulful as you're going to get. So I'll take on more. And if we've got to build more and bigger and better, and we've got to go from 3 social workers to 6, that's what we'll do. I'll find a way to make that happen. So I don't have to say I'm sorry when that thing beside me rings. We'll have an answer.
Wow. Glenn, it's something that I think you make a good point, and this is something that comes up on this show all the time. People think that, they see Austin Matthews and it's $13.25 million, and they go, well, he gets every dollar of that. Oh, even if it's taxes,
agents take most of it.
Crazy money that the agents make, like unbelievable. Have you been to Allan's estate? It's gated and everything. It's crazy.
That's not even allowed there. I mean, I think he's got his own island. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Casa Walsh is on it. Yeah. So, but I think people think that, okay, well, if you make, because it is a lot more money than all of us make. But what you forget sometimes is, the average, if you get 5 years in the NHL, that's a good career. And that's got to last you the rest of your life, because a lot of these guys don't have training like the rest of us in something else. And so it's a really sort of under talked about, underappreciated. And I think the lack of empathy towards it is the part that surprises me the most, because I still, we'll still get comments on videos going like, oh God, those guys made millions. They're fine. And Glenn, and the reality is, especially in your era, they didn't.
No, look, I can tell you, pensions for the guys that played in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, they were looking at $7,000 Canadian a year. Okay, you can't even take a trip to Disney for that, and that's per year, and that's with a 20-year career. I mean, if I told you some of the pensions of the Gordie Howes and Ted Lindsay's, you'd be mortified. Yeah, just how poor they are. Pat Flatley, Ted Lindsay, myself got together with Bobby Orr and Jean Beliveau to create what they called supplemental gifting to improve the pensions. And this was back in the lockout in 2004. And, that program was started to help 142 players, not a pension because it could stop at any time, but just to double up a little bit on giving them a chance with their pension. Most used it for health care. Most used it for medication. Some used it in any shape or form, but it was so needed. 142 guys. Well, that program has continued now for 20 years, and there's 737 players that are getting help with supplemental gifting. So Pat Flatley, thank you, and Ted Lindsay, God bless you. You guys were the ones spearheading that.
Jean Beliveau, like you said, he stepped up big time for the retired players.
Yeah, and he still is doing that. I mean, even as he's passed away, his lovely wife Elise has said, continue to put Jean in hockey card sets and put him on a video game if that can help some of his teammates and players that he played with, because we think that's important. I mean, that's your ultimate sense of giving in every way. So, yeah, those guys really made a difference. But, yeah, their pensions, terrible. And then the other reality is, everybody thinks of everybody's Austin Matthews or everyone's McDavid. Look at the money they're making. The reality is, and Allan would know the exact number, but there are hundreds of players in the NHL last year that made less than $1 million, which you might think is, oh my gosh, it's a ton of money. And it is. I mean, considering my dad fought in the war for 5 years for free, it's a ton of money. But the reality is, at a 56% tax rate in this country, a 14% escrow, and a couple percent, very minimum, because agents are like that, goes to the agents. You're taking home 20-some% of your paycheck, and your average career is 2 years. So not a long career. And most guys, the way the economics of the game are, yes, you've got the stars that are making the big dollars, but most of the players, it's a pedestrian wage for a sports franchise, and that career ends pretty quick. And your average age of an NHL player is now about 23 and a half. So at 24, you're closer to becoming me. That's not a pleasant sight. Good luck
to you. And when you amortize a player's career earnings over a projected entire work life, say to age 65, the astronomical sums of money they're making in the NHL all of a sudden amortizes down to below $100,000 a year.
Yes.
And when I say that, I always get a couple of comments from, but they were playing a game. I would have played the game for free to have a chance to play in the NHL. Well, you know what? You weren't good enough to play in the NHL. These are the most highly skilled hockey players in the entire world who worked from the time they were 5, 6 years old doing primarily one thing, to get to the NHL and then stay in the NHL as long as they could. And then, bam, it's over.
Yep.
And it's over too. The tragic part is it's over typically without you making that call. It's a pink slip. I recall for me, there was a Swedish goaltender they were trying to get to come over. I had just signed a 2-year deal with the Maple Leafs. I was 40. Big mistake to sign me for a 2-year deal. Sorry. But anyways, I did get it. And the Swedish goalie said, I'm not coming if Glenn Healy's there. I won't beat him out. He's played for 16 years. He's gonna be a better goalie than me. I haven't even started my career yet. All right, well then buy Glenn out. I hadn't even worked out from the last year, and up pulls the Courier in June, and that's me. My career's over and it's done. But you do bring up a good point. I can recall when I was 20 or 21, and I was thinking of this journey to play in the NHL, and I thought this would be a good thing if I could only crack the ranks, so to speak. And I managed to do it. And I had a bunch of friends. I grew up in Pickering, Ontario. I joked that there's an 8-reactor nuclear power plant. Yes, there is 8 reactors. 2 of them are defunct, so it's not really 8. Maybe it's only 6, but it's up there, okay? Like, we're setting records. And I had a bunch of buddies that were like, yeah, Scarborough.
Same, right down the street.
Yeah, and I had a bunch of buddies that were like, I'm going to go work for the Pickering nuclear power plant. And I thought, well, why would you ever want to do that? I mean, think about working there. My goodness. Well, let's fast forward a number of years. They're all retired. They all have incredible pensions.
Yeah.
They all are making really good money staying at home. They all have health care, and they have healthcare plus. They've added on with prescriptions and semi-privates. And here I am, that guy, wow, I looked up to Glenn. He played 16 years in the NHL. I'm still working. Like, man, did I pick the wrong fork in the road? I could have left Scarborough and went somewhere else. But it is ironic that as we joke years back at what are they thinking and doing, they turn out to have probably made the better decision. But that being said, like, I think if you look at all the players, they would not turn any of this in for 1 second. The chasing a championship, getting your name on the cup forever, doing something that you've always wanted to do. Look, I remember one of my very first Christmas gifts that I ever received, ever. And I was 5 years old, and I don't remember much when I was 5, but I got a pair of Gordie Howe skates.
Ooh.
And I remember the first time I ever skated on those skates. A cold winter's night in Pickering, snow coming down, and that was me. I don't remember the second time I skated. I don't remember the last time I skated, but I remembered that. And that was me on my journey. And I wouldn't turn that journey in for anything. But as that journey has come to an end and you're beat up physically and emotionally and financially, you just need some help from your unique brotherhood. And that's what we're providing. I don't need pity from anyone. I don't need to have people say, look, you guys are all millionaires. I get it. I could have played, but I hurt my knee. I get it. I'm sure you could have, even though they didn't really allow people that are 5'3" in the NHL, but I'm sure you could have made it. And, when you're 400 pounds, it's hard to play in the NHL. I get it. But that being said, like for our guys, they wouldn't turn it back on anything, but they sometimes just need a little help, and we'll provide that help, and we'll do it quietly. And it takes good people, fabric of the game, people like Allan that have fought for players forever. It takes the league getting on board, Gary and Bill, and maybe Gary's, he looks at his journey and all the years he spent running the National Hockey League differently than he did when he was in 92, 93, coming into the sport as a young commissioner. He might look at it different. Marty Walsh as the head of the PA, he certainly looks at it different, coming from a union background, a labor background, and a background where substance abuse has been part of his family, and he knows you need some help from your friends sometimes.
Yes.
And so yeah, we've got all the right people in position now to make the change we have to make, and we're going to make it. And I'm confident that the people in power will make it with us.
Wow.
You tell that story about the skates. I grew up in a neighborhood in a suburb of Montreal where every day there was a street hockey game in front of my house, and all the boys were 4 years, 3 years older than me. And starting around 5 years old, I remember standing in the living room window watching them play. and I'd go down the stairs with my little hockey stick, and I'd ask them to let me play. And they all said I was too young to go away. And then, I'd go back into the house in tears, and over again, that would happen. And then finally I came out one day and they said, well, if you're willing to be the goalie, you can play today. And I went into the net. I had no goalie pads. And at the end of the day, both of my knees were totally ripped up from going down and sliding on the snow in the pavement. And sitting having dinner at home. My dad's looking at my knees. He's like, what happened to you? And I told him that the boys finally let me play hockey and I was the goalie. And boy, I sure could use some goalie pads. And I would love to be a goalie and I'd love to play goal. And 3 months, I didn't have goalie pads and had ripped up knees when I was 6 years old. And then one Friday I came home from school and there was a new pair of goalie pads sitting on my bed.
Oh.
And I remember crying my eyes out, putting those goalie pads on, and I literally didn't take them off. I slept in them. You hear stories of I slept with those little goalie pads on my 6-year-old legs, and I refused to take them off. And just the thought of you telling that story now brought that memory back. And it's not on topic, but I just wanted to share it. We owe so much to the game, and we owe so much to the players that played the game. And Glenn, you're one of those players,
Yep.
But no one has made an impact more on players who played the game in the entire history of the world than you.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you know that, and I know that. Yeah. And I don't mean to embarrass you, or, you're not getting an Academy Award for it, but you deserve one.
Well, thank you. Can I tell my goalie pad story?
Yes.
Yours, Allan.
I love this story.
So I got a set of pads. They somehow fell off a truck at the Legion in Pickering.
Oh.
Branch 606. They just appeared. And so I was this young goaltender with a set of pads. They were kind of like up almost to my eyes, right? So they must have been from a monster, some 16-year-old kid. And they were mine now as a 6-year-old goalie. And, okay, immobile in the net. Yeah, you could probably say that. Titanic-like, probably going to hit the iceberg, not get out of the way. But I wore those for my whole life up till I was 16. And then I grew a little bit from 5 to 16. And those pads then were below my knees. And I kept getting hit on the top of the knees. And I thought, okay, now's the time when I'm going to go to my dad and ask for a new set of pads because I'm getting hurt. Mm-hmm. Like these pucks hurt, getting hit. And my dad thought very long and hard about, yes, okay, pucks, getting hit, knee, pads below the knee. Okay, tape measure. All right. Got it. Yes. Now I'm waiting for the we'll get you the new pads line, which should be the next part of the Academy Award if you're going to win the movie. And this is the end of the story. No, he looked at me and said, well, you know what? Catch the pucks. That's what they put gloves in your hands for. So I didn't get my new pads. I still wore the old ones. And, man, I got the fastest glove hand on the planet. That was to get hit in the top of the knees. And it wasn't until later that I actually got a better set of pads. But, when you look at my career and you look at my pads versus, say, Marc Andres, or you look at some of the goalies today, Shirkin, any of these guys, they're all like the pads basically. I wore short pads my whole career. Why? Because I wore short pads my whole career.
Yeah.
From when I was 7 all the way up. None of them fit. They were always too short, and I could never get used to a bigger set. But, those are the memories and the stories, and, it worked out for me. Maybe not so much for Allan between the pipes. But I think he's right with the one thing. Players, they built the game, they played the game, and sometimes that little push from their friends makes a difference. And allowing them into the game like they did, Allan, maybe opened the door for them to get that chance. But we shouldn't turn our back on them because they're not going to get us 2 points in the Bell Center, or they're not going to get us 2 points at the Scotiabank Arena. We should not turn our back on them.
Yeah. And I hope anybody who took the time to listen to this today maybe has a different opinion about retired players. And the vast majority of them are not multi-gazillionaires sitting there living a lavish lifestyle. They're dealing with a lot of health issues, a lot of emotional issues, and they need resources and they need just a little bit of help. And you're the person spearheading all of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's what we should be doing. Let's make tomorrow better than today for a bunch of players and just, hey, give them some help and hope. And one day, whether it's a listener, it could be them that requires a little help in their friends. So make it happen. And if not you, then who? You be the guy to make a difference. And that's the way I look at it. So when I do turn the light off of this place, Allan, I'll show you where the keys are. I'll show you. You know, we could do the goalie spin kindred spirit thing, you know, and we could tell your story. I'll tell mine. But at the end of the day, there's a warm seat if you're willing. So you just don't lose my number.
I love you, Glenn. Thank you so much for your time. Happy holidays. Wish you a great Christmas. Happy holiday season for you and your family. And thank you so much for taking the time to come here and talk to us today.
Thank you, Glenn.
And the good news is the mail strike is over in Canada.
Yes,
so now I get to see the great Christmas card that Allan sends every year, and I go, man, that's a good looking family. I don't know what happened there. I just don't.
How did he manage that?
I don't know what happened, but he's done well.
It's on the way.
All the best, guys. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Heels.
This has been Agent Provocateur with Allan Walsh and Adam Wylde. Follow Allan Walsh on Twitter @WalshA. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts by searching Agent Provocateur and hitting the subscribe button. YouTube.com/SDPN.